Anywhere else. It's so great to have you joining us. Folks, here's a camera. Let's say hi to everybody who's with us remotely via Zoom. It is great to see all of you this morning. I am very pleased to be leading worship this morning with Chrissy Bushyeager, our Director of Religious Education, Bob Rowland, our Music Director, and a host of volunteers who are here both in the tech booth and as the hospitality team to welcome us this morning. As usual this morning, if you are viewing us remotely, at the end of the service, if you would like to stay online, we will put you in a breakout room so you can have a virtual coffee hour. And some exciting news for those of you who are here in person, starting next Sunday, weather permitting, we are going to have an outdoor coffee hour following the in-person services. It's going to be a time of informal, I say coffee hour, we're not actually going to have coffee. We'll have refreshments for you, but hopefully you'll feel free to gather a little while after the service together and socialize if you're here in person. Also, for those of you who are viewing remotely, you can use the closed captioning function if that helps you to participate in the service. Chrissy, what else have we forgotten to talk about? That's everything? Okay. Well, I also want to let you know that we are still in the middle of our annual fund drive. Our annual fund drive is a time in which we make a pledge of financial support to the church for the coming year. The fund drive is just about ready to wrap up in another week or, what is it, Natasha? No, one more week. One more week, and we need your support. And so during this time, we have been inviting members of the church to come up and tell us a little bit about their connection to the church, what it means to them. And today I want to welcome Deirdre Konar to come up and speak with us. Deirdre?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Deirdre Konar, and I'm most appreciative for the opportunity to speak with you today. I grew up in Delaware County, and I feel so fortunate that I am able to raise my family here as well. In high school, I had several good friends who were part of UU-CDC's Yucky program, and they were always doing really cool things with their church friends. And from a young age, I remember thinking, wow, I wish I felt that passionately about my church. Well, finally, many years later, I am so happy that my family is a member of UU-CDC, and my heart is full watching my children develop deep friendships with their church friends. We came to UU-CDC when our sons, Henry and Wesley, were very young. We wanted to provide an opportunity for them to root their faith in a loving community that ignites personal growth and serves others with integrity. In hindsight, I wish we had the courage to start our journey before the kids were born, as this community has added so much value to our lives and our spiritual practices. From our start, we were part of the RE program, which has provided opportunities for our whole family to make new friends, and for my husband, Ross, and I to grow in our faith. Coming to church each week brings me hope in a brighter future. Services lift me up when I'm feeling down, and our community gives me a renewed faith in humanity. I feel fortunate to have found this community who shares our values, especially around parenting. Early in the pandemic, Chrissy Bushyeager devoted her time and created space for parents to connect virtually with each other, so we felt less alone during a very dark time. Later in the pandemic, several community members volunteered their time leading virtual workshops for parents of children who missed out on the OWL program. The opportunities that UU-CDC has given me to connect with and learn from other like-minded parents have been extraordinary and enrich our lives tremendously. Your donations help the church to keep running, from our beautiful grounds to our extraordinary staff. To be honest with you, after all these years, I didn't realize that Chrissy wasn't full-time. The amount of work she accomplishes and the impact she has is simply amazing. I'm so excited for the possibility for our church to offer Chrissy full-time work. Your generosity enables UU-CDC to have a broad community impact through partnerships with other local nonprofits and by providing opportunities for our own personal growth, such as through book clubs, Soul Matters, and anti-racism workshops. Together, our philanthropy supports programs that benefit our membership and the larger community. in which we all live. To me, there's no better cause than working to build an intentional, inclusive community that enriches the lives of my family, friends, and neighbors. During this annual drive, we are asking you to make a pledge that will support the church's operations in the 22-23 fiscal year, which starts in July. The pandemic has taken a toll on the larger nonprofit community, and our beloved church is no exception. Please consider making a stretch gift this year by increasing your pledge by 10% from last fiscal year, or by reviewing the Fair Share guidelines that suggest giving 3 to 6% of your annual income. Pledges from our congregation make up the majority of UUCDC's annual budget. By making your pledge now, you help church leaders to strategically and confidently plan for next year's activities. For our family, paying off our pledge via reoccurring monthly donations enables us to give a larger amount. Between young children and 2 full-time working parents, anything that I can set and forget about is appealing to me, whether that be the crock pot or my monthly donations. Making your pledge now is easy. There are pledge forms in the hallway, and you should have also received an email with the link to a gift form. You can also set up reoccurring gifts to automatically charge your credit card every week or 2 using Breeze, the church's online secure portal. And I'm going to guess there's someone out there right now who would be so kind as to drop the link in the Zoom chat for our friends who are participating from home today. The pledge drive ends on April 3rd, but I hope you will make your pledge today. In our services, the chalice symbolizes wisdom, knowledge, and spiritual insight, and the flame that rises from the chalice represents the light of illumination and understanding. Please join me in increasing your annual pledge to UUCDC in order for us to create a brighter future together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. John Davies and Natasha Davis, who head up our fund drive this year, asked me to embellish a little more after Deirdre was finished, but I don't know what else I can say. That's just fantastic, and thank you so much for those remarks. One thing I would like to say is that through this pandemic, there has been one constant amidst all the change and uncertainty, and that constant has been the generosity of all of you. You here in the room, you at home, all our members of UUCDC. We have been very generous in our giving to our Share the Plate partners and to supporting our church financially. I know this is a time of disruption, a time of transition, and it is especially important at these times of transition and disruption that we are able to commit to supporting this institution. As Deirdre pointed out, our annual pledge drive is the primary way in which we financially support UUCDC. UUCDC does not receive grant money. It does not receive money from the Unitarian Universalist Association. In fact, we pay the UUA dues every year that comes out of our pledges. So your generosity is the way that this church will continue through this time of transition. So as Deirdre said, we want to support our staff, we want to support our facilities, we want to support our mission, and your generosity in making your pledge will enable us to do that. So thank you very much. Now let us begin our worship. We are going to begin our worship by singing. We're going to sing Once to Every Soul and Nation. I invite you here in the sanctuary, those here, to rise, and you're able to sing with your masks on. Those at home, no masks. Rise in body or in spirit as you feel moved. So let us begin our worship with our opening hymn.
may be seated. Please join me as we recite our covenant together. Enriched by our differences and joined together in our search for meaning, we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others with a joyful heart. I'd like to invite the Stiegel-Liu family, Emmy, Bear, and Kirsten, forward to light our chalice.
Good morning. We light our chalice flame this morning with words of the Reverend Sarah Lawal, who serves the Boise UU Fellowship in Boise, Idaho. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames we rise. Let us join now in singing our opening centering song, our meditation here in the sanctuary. Feel free to sing along with your masks on. May we be whole. May I be whole, may you be whole, may we be whole. This concept of wholeness, I think, is grounded in belonging, a sense of community, a sense of being one with one another. We ritualize that oneness, that wholeness in our time together by dropping stones of joy and sorrow into our bowl. Those stones represent the events in our lives that we are celebrating or that are weighing us down. And just as the stones come together in that bowl, so are we gathered together, both here and online, in our shared humanity. And so for those who are at home online, I invite you to put a joy or sorrow into the chat. And for those here, I invite you to drop a stone into our bowl. All are welcome. I'll drop several stones in just a moment. Stones representing the joys and sorrows for those who are online with us today. A stone to represent the joys and sorrows of members of our community who are not with us today. And 2 stones of joy that I've been asked to share, one from Heidi Starr and Pete Bretz, who have found out this week that they're going to be grandparents in August, and Janet and Janet Bowes and Brian Bowes, who found out they're going to be grandparents in September. So we share those joys today. Let us enter into a time of prayer, meditation, reflection. Spirit of life and love, great and gracious God, infinite presence that flows through us and around us and among us, especially when we are gathered, but which has no name. We give thanks for this time together. We give thanks for the opportunity to share the joys and the sorrows of our lives, to be in community, this blessed community of belonging, a place where we walk through the doors and are greeted with smiles, hugs, bright, shining faces of our youngest members. We are ever so thankful for our opportunity to gather both here again and online. And we know the world is full of strife, that the people of Ukraine are fighting valiantly for their freedom, that tens of millions have been displaced and dispersed. We pray for their well-being. We pray for the cessation of hostilities, for the return of peace to their homelands, so they may pick up the pieces of their lives. It is so challenging to watch what's happening in the world. Sometimes we feel unable to do anything. So let us open our hearts to all those who are suffering near and far. And let us reaffirm our commitment to peace, to making peace, to finding peace, to being peace. We offer up all these prayers in the name of all that is holy and in all the holy names. Amen. I invite those of you who are here in the sanctuary today to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing Spirit of Life, and we'll also accompany that singing with our hand motions that Melissa and Edza provided to us earlier this year. Please rise in body or in spirit. At home, certainly you may join us in these movements. The Spirit of Life, our chalice flame. That burns while we wait for the next slide.
Good morning. So today I'm going to tell you a true story. This is a story from our UU history, and it's a story from world history. A little over 80 years ago, a war was starting in Europe. There was a man named Hitler who was one of the biggest and most dangerous bullies of all time. And he and his army, the Nazis, took over a part of Czechoslovakia. Now, the people who lived there, they didn't want to live there under Hitler's rule. And so they were feeling scared, and they left their homes. And when a person leaves their homes because they are under threat, they are called a refugee. So these refugees went to a city called Prague, and they went to the Unitarian churches there to seek help. Now, in America, the American Unitarian Church also wanted to help these refugees. So they called upon a minister named Reverend Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha Sharp, who was a social worker. And they asked the Sharps to go to Prague and help with these refugees. Now, Waitstill and Martha had two young children, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they had a comfortable life in Massachusetts. But their faith called them to help. So they left. They left their children in the care of some very good friends from church, and they went to Europe. And as they traveled across Europe to Prague, they organized people who would also help, people who would help with food and lodging and transportation and papers, all the way until they got to Prague. And when they got to Prague, the war was getting closer. And right after they got there, the city of Prague was taken over by the Nazi army. So it became an even more dangerous place. But they continued to do their work. Martha helped one of the resistance leaders to find safety, and she did this by using her American passport. And she and this man walked through the city. They went through 3 checkpoints where army officers were asking them for their papers. And Martha showed her American passport and pretended that this man was her husband. And they made it through 3 checkpoints to the British embassy so that he would be safe. In July of that year, the army ransacked their office, threw all the furniture into the street. And then in August, Waitstill went to Switzerland to a conference so that he could get more support for the stuff they were doing. And when he tried to get back into Czechoslovakia, they wouldn't let him in. Martha, knowing that she was in danger, left and went to Paris, where she met up with her husband, and they sailed back to America. The next year, the American Unitarians formed the Unitarian Service Committee, and they asked Martha and Waitstill to go back to Europe. And once again, they agreed to pause their lives here in America and go and help. They went to Portugal, to Lisbon, and set up the Unitarian Service Committee office in Lisbon, and they helped thousands of people. So they helped a lot of famous people, like a Jewish novelist named Leon Feuchtwanger. And the way they did this was Martha dressed up. She pretended she was a French peasant woman. And so she took Leon Feuchtwanger on the train from Marseille to the border of Spain, and she distracted the guards by pretending to be a French peasant woman. And it worked, and he made it to safety. But it wasn't just famous people that the Sharps helped. Martha was committed to helping children. She worked through the bureaucratic system in America to help young children come here to our country and to escape. She those transports that she created saved hundreds of children. The Sharps believed that good people need to stand up in the face of evil. They believed in doing whatever they could to make the world a better place. The Unitarian Service Committee office stayed open in Lisbon throughout the entire war, and thousands of people were saved through the work of the Sharps and other volunteers. Thank you for listening to my story today. It is time for our young children to go to their RE classes. Bob's going to play our sending song. When he plays it the first time, the teachers will head into the lobby, and the second time, our kids will go to their classes.
sky above. As you leave, you go with love. You are sunlight, you are rain. May you bless this space again. You are earth and sky above. As you leave, you go with love.
Now is the time in our service where we accept your generosity to support this church and its work in the world. We gather your offering via electronics this morning, as we have been throughout the pandemic. You can use your smartphone to text the words offering and the amount you'd like to offer to the number printed on your screen. We gratefully receive your generosity this morning. Our reading this morning is a poem written by the Poet Laureate of Great Britain. His name is Simon Armitage. He wrote this poem in response to the events happening in Ukraine as we speak. The poem is entitled Resistance. It's war again. A family carries its family out of a pranged house under a burning thatch. The next scene smacks of archive newsreel, platforms and trains, never again, toddlers passed over heads and shoulders, lifetimes stowed in luggage racks. It's war again, unmistakable smoke on the near horizon, mistaken for thick fog, fingers crossed. An old blue tractor tows an armored tank into no man's land. It's the ceasefire hour. Godspeed the columns of winter coats and fur-lined hoods, the high wire walk over buckled bridges, managing cases and bags, balancing west and east. Godspeed. It's war again. The woman in black gives sunflower seeds to the soldier, insists his marrow will nourish the national flower. In dreams, let bullets be birds, let cluster bombs burst into flocks. False news is news with the pity edited out. It's war again. An air raid siren can't fully mute the cathedral bells. Let's call it hope. A poem entitled Resistance. And now we are going to hear a recording of the Ukraine national anthem. Keith Idema. That's the name of the neighborhood bully when I was growing up. Keith was a few years older than I, and every day he'd terrorize me and other grade schoolers while we waited for the bus at the bus stop. Every day I wondered whether I'd be the one that Keith set his sights on, the vulnerable antelope that would be culled from the rest of the herd. Keith would knock your lunchbox out of your hand, he'd steal your snacks, he would knock you down and stand over you like some kind of ruthless warrior. We were all afraid of him, and every day we dreaded waiting for the bus. Now, I was a pretty meek kid when I was little. Afraid of my own shadow is the term my parents used. So to help me build my self-confidence, my parents enrolled me in judo class. I can still recall the coarse texture of the heavy judogi, the jacket you wore. I could feel it against my skin. And I can remember the sweat of my sensei, my teacher. His name was Fred Margolis. He sweat a lot as he was teaching us these moves. He taught us how to fall without hurting ourselves and the basic moves for beginners. And I remember how much fun it was to practice the moves with the other students, who included my older sister. Now, you probably know where this is headed. It was a day like any other school day, and I had to wait at the bus stop with all the other kids in the neighborhood. And up rolls Keith Idema on his bicycle, one of those flashy bikes, you know, the ones with the banana seat and the ape-hanger handlebars, right? And he comes screeching to a halt and showers everybody at the bus stop with gravel. He lays down his bike and he walks right over to me. Today is my day to be picked on. And I don't know what came over me, but when he moved to grab my Batman lunchbox, I grabbed the front of his shirt, swept my leg behind his like I was taught in judo class, and threw him down to the ground. That felt so good, I have to tell you. And what felt even better was that he never picked on me again. Now, unfortunately, Eastern Europe is not a bus stop. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not a meek grade schooler. And unfortunately, Vladimir Putin isn't the neighborhood bully stealing snacks. I wish it were as simple as me standing up to Keith Idema and putting him in his place. Instead, one of the world's superpowers is using its military might to impose its will on a sovereign neighboring nation with a democratically elected government. It is bombing civilian sites like maternity hospitals, theaters, and schools, committing atrocities unseen in the Western world in the past century, since the past century. It's war again, the poet writes, unmistakable smoke on the near horizon, mistaken for thick fog, fingers crossed. There have been reports of mass deportations to the far reaches of Russia, thousands of people herded onto buses and railroad cars, stripped of their identity and shipped off to unknown destinations. Does that sound familiar? It does to me. Sickeningly so. This week, our government declared that Russian forces are committing war crimes across the Ukrainian countryside, attacking unarmed civilians as they attempt to flee the violence. It's the ceasefire hour. Godspeed, the columns of winter coats and fur-lined hoods, the high wire walk over buckled bridges, managing cases and bags, balancing west and east. Godspeed. And amidst it all, the Ukrainian people are fighting for their lives, fighting for their country, fighting for their freedom, standing up to the bully, Putin, with unexpected, inspirational tenacity. It's war again. The woman in black gives sunflower seeds to the soldier, insists his marrow will nourish the national flower. A coalition of nations, unprecedented in their unification, has isolated and sanctioned Russia and is supplying arms to support the resistance in hopes of pushing back the tide of violence. It's war again. An air raid siren can't fully mute the cathedral bells. Let's call that hope. How, as people of faith, do we respond to the carnage that currently floods our airwaves? As Unitarian Universalists, what does our faith require of us in the face of war crimes and possibly even genocide? What does our faith tell us about the forces of evil asserting themselves not just in Ukraine, but, if we look closely enough, around the globe? Because we must admit that we're particularly exercised about this war in Ukraine due to both its geography and its demography. A white Western democracy is under attack. This one cuts close to the bone, whereas atrocities committed in Africa and Asia feel distant and alien. And yes, I will acknowledge here and admit that ours is a glass house that we live in, and that our government has engaged in its share of nation building over the past decades. So there's that old saw about when you point your finger at someone else, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. To call Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its attack on civilians evil, or to call Vladimir Putin himself evil, might make Unitarian Universalists uncomfortable. Unitarian Universalism, after all, proclaims that all people have inherent worth and dignity. To call someone evil feels like a form of othering that would seem anathema to our faith. Unitarian Universalists have long struggled with the concept of evil and its close cousin, sin. And we were famously branded as theological lightweights by none other than Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. In an interview after her husband's assassination, Coretta Scott King revealed that she and Dr. King had at one time considered becoming Unitarians, but that they found that our faith lacked a sufficient theology of evil. That's an ouch. But to a certain extent, I feel we are justly accused. Ours is admittedly a sunny side up kind of faith. Our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all leads us toward optimism based on hope and a fervent belief that the forces of good will eventually overcome the forces of darkness. It was our own Unitarian forebear, after all, Reverend Theodore Parker, who first asserted that the moral arc of the universe is long, but that it bends toward justice. And we tenaciously hold on to that belief despite all evidence to the contrary. And there is plenty of evidence to the contrary. I would assert that to deny the existence of evil is actually antithetical to our faith. Let me say that again. To deny the existence of evil is antithetical to Unitarian Universalism. As UUs, we prize the use of reason over what might be called magical thinking. We are the Missouri, or if you live out there, I guess it's Missouri, of the religious landscape, the show-me state, if you will. We follow the science. And I would say that there's plenty of science to follow here. Atrocities abound throughout human history. Whether we're talking about systemic evils like slavery and white supremacy, or genocides created by human intention and action, most recently in Rwanda, Bosnia, Myanmar, or the Holocaust of the Nazis, to individual acts of inexplicable cruelty like torture and the sexual exploitation of children. Evil not only exists, we have to admit that it abounds. While as UUs we reject the idea of original sin and proclaim that we are all born perfect and whole, it is the ultimate act of self-delusion to assert that we do not possess a tremendous capacity for cruelty and a taste for the blood of our enemies. James Luther Adams, the great Unitarian theologian of the 20th century, cautioned us against denying these aspects of our humanity. It cannot be denied, he wrote, it cannot be denied that religious liberalism has neglected these aspects of human nature in its zeal to proclaim the spark of divinity in every person. We may call these tendencies by any name we wish, but we do not escape their destructive influence by a conspiracy of silence concerning them. So if we admit that evil exists, both systemically and individually, how do we act in the face of it? To put it as concisely as I can, the answer is this. In the face of evil, we are called to be forces of good and forces for good. We are called to house the homeless, feed the hungry, comfort the afflicted. We are called, like the Sharps during World War II, whom we heard about earlier from Chrissy, to respond and do what we can. Whether it's contributing to this month's Share the Plate partner or boycotting Nestle products because of their refusal to stop doing business in Russia, or sending aid and assistance to refugee relief agencies, we must do what we can. But I think there's more. Because I intentionally said that we are called to be forces for good. And use of force to resist evil is not evil. Sometimes it is necessary and good. Unitarian Universalism does not require us to be pacifists. While we welcome those among us who ascribe to this ethic, our faith is not grounded in the principle that any violence is unjustifiable for any reason, and that all disputes can be and must be settled by peaceful means. That's not to say that we shouldn't try. We absolutely should. Make no mistake about that. Each week from this pulpit, I pray that we will be instruments of peace, that we will make peace, that we will be peace. So striving for peaceful resolution of conflicts, even armed conflict, should be a measure of first and persistent resort, but not the last resort. I would love to be able to advocate peaceful means as a solution to all conflict. I would love to follow the admonitions of St. Paul in chapter 12 of his letter to the Romans, where he urges, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. But there comes a time where force must be met with force, evil met with the force and forces of good. I want to go on record that I support Joe Biden and his work building a strong coalition of nations that are imposing sanctions on Russia, and all the efforts our government and others have made to resolve the conflict through diplomatic means. Yes, meeting force with force should be a last resort, but it must be a step that we're willing to take. And believe me, I do not say this lightly. In fact, just the opposite. We must, for the sake of all that is holy and good, when we have exhausted all peaceful means, be prepared to do what is necessary and right, even if it means the taking of a human life, or hundreds, or God forbid, thousands. I know this may be a controversial statement, but sometimes, after you have exhausted all peaceful means, we must respond to the bully in the only language the bully understands. What comforts me in these circumstances, if we get to that point, is the concept of just war. And I don't have time this morning to get into a lengthy explanation of the origins of this concept of just war. But here are the highlights. A just war must be fought for a just cause, which usually means to protect innocent life that is in imminent danger. A just war must be initiated by a political authority within a political system that allows distinctions of justice. There must be a purity of intention, a likelihood of success, and proportionality in the response. And finally, force may be used only after all peaceful and viable alternatives have been seriously tried and exhausted or are clearly not practical under the circumstances. I dearly hope and I fervently pray that it doesn't come to this, that we and other free nations would need to directly intervene in the war in Ukraine. I pray that diplomatic pressures and sanctions are successful and that peace will be restored. But if they aren't, my faith permits me to look into the face of the perpetrator of genocide, the hostile invader of a free democratic country, possibly the instigator of biological or chemical weapons, and to label them what they are and what they're doing as evil. And my faith calls me to apply the forces of good, force used proportionately and for the sake of restoring peace, to vanquish it. In dreams, let bullets be birds, let cluster bombs burst into flocks. It's war again. An air raid siren can't fully mute the cathedral bells. Let's call that hope. Let us pray that that be so, but let us prepare if it's not. Blessed be. Our closing hymn this morning is "This Is My Song." I invite those gathered here to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing. Those at home, feel free to sing along as well. Please be seated. Please join me in saying the words on the screen as we extinguish our chalice flame. Although we now extinguish our chalice flame, may we hold its warmth in our hearts in all the days ahead. Thank you, Bob, for the gift of your music today. Thank you to the virtual choir, the UUC virtual choir, which we hope we'll see sometime soon again in person. Thank you to our hospitality team, to our tech team, to Marilyn Huff, who's our online host today. Thank you for all of you being here, both virtually and in person. I want to remind those who are online that if you'd like to stay for coffee hour, you'll be put into a breakout room and you can meet with people in a smaller group. Let us rise in body or in spirit now and join in saying the words of our benediction. If you're nearby with someone you'd like to hold hands with, please feel free to do so. And if not, we'll virtually hold hands by holding our hands up in the air. And we say these words together. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. And for those who come to seek a path, may your way be found, and the courage to take it, step by step. Blessed be. And I would ask parents of children in religious education to go to wherever they're meeting and pick them up as you exit the sanctuary. Thank you again for being here. Have a good week.